Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Shua, and today I'm going to be running through all of the books that I read in March. So, I read 18 books in March, which is quite a lot for me. But fear not, for both me and you. I won't be talking in detail about 18 books today for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because some of them were covered in my BookTube prize rankings video, and I have also done a few solo reviews for the women's prize books that I have read. So I will touch on them briefly, tell you where they rank in the grand scheme of March, but I won't go into loads of detail. So hopefully this video won't be like 45 hours long. But before we go into the books, just a bit of a recap on how I'm doing goal-wise. So if you are new, my main sort of overarching goal for the year is to read more books by non-UK, non-US authors than by UK or US authors. I'm still behind on this goal. So in March, I read 50% of books by American authors, 17% by British authors, which means only 33% by non-US, non-UK authors. So 6 of the books that I read were by authors of different nationalities. I had one by a French-Korean author, one by a Canadian author, one by an Irish, one by a Mexican-Canadian author, one by a Cree author, and one by a Jamaican author. So quite a good spread. Maybe slightly Canadian heavy, but that's fine. Which means that in the total of 2023, I am now at 30% non-UK, non-US. So I've got a way to go to push that over the 50%. So I kind of need to start focusing on it probably soon. The other 2 goals I have are my BookTube inspired 2023 TBR, which I have actually only read 1 out of 12 books for. And we are now going into April. So, well, we are in April. We are quite far into April. So I am behind on that. However, I have started another one this month, and I'm due to start another one next week. So I will be at 3 out of 12, hopefully by the end of April. Still behind, but not quite as far behind. And then for my 100 book bucket list challenge, where I picked 10 books from my 100 book bucket list, I have read 2 out of 10. So again, slightly behind on that, but not too far behind. And yeah, so that's where we are with goals, etc. So let's have a chat about the 18 books, shall we? So we'll start with the worst, and by far the worst books I read in March and all year were The Idiot and Either Or by Elif. Batuman. I gave these 1.5 stars. They are a series. They follow the same girl in her first and second year of college, and I detested both. I did read both for the BookTube prize, otherwise they would have been DNF'd. So if you want to see my super salty review of those books, I will leave that video for you below. But man, it was hard work. Pretentious college people. Moving into 16th place, we have Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout. I gave this one 2.5 stars. This is just not my jam. It was more or less plotless about a boring woman who's sort of in her older years, 50s, maybe 60s, and her going to live by the sea during COVID. It was really dull. Again, another BookTube prize one. I'll leave that video below if you want to see more saltiness. Oh, hello, Rudy. Next up, another BookTube prize one. So you can see that the BookTube prize didn't work out very well for me, because the next one is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This got 3 stars. It was fine. It was just very, very average for me. The characters weren't particularly well developed, following the fictional daughter of Dr. Moreau from the H.G. Wells classic The Island of Dr. Moreau, looking at sort of like experimental hybrid creatures that Dr. Moreau has cultivated, and like his daughter's experience living within that, but set in Mexico. But yeah, it was, like I say, there was nothing particularly wrong with it. It was quite an easy read, but just average. Next up, we have Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. I buddy read this with the lovely Kellyanne Mitchell. If you're not aware of Kelly's channel, she is an absolute delight. I'll leave it linked below. She is desperately undersubscribed because she's so much fun to listen to. She reads pretty much every genre you can think of, and I just absolutely adore her critiques on books and her general persona. So yeah, go check her out because she's amazing. This book, however, was not. No, it was okay. It was just quite boring. It's set in the Troubles in Ireland, and it's been longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I haven't done a solo review for this yet. I don't know if I will, because it was just a bit bland for most of the book, and I understand what the author was trying to do. It follows a young woman, and she gets into an inappropriate relationship, and we sort of follow her as she is effectively going about her normal life while Belfast is in a state of war, pretty much. So yeah, the last 50 pages meant that the book made more sense to me, but I just couldn't forgive 250 pages of meh, really. So yeah, unfortunately this one didn't work for me, and I was really disappointed because I was really anticipating this one. So what can you do? Next up, we have another Women's Prize longlisted book, and that is Fire Rush by Jaqueline Crooks. So we're still in 3-star territory here, and this was a really tricky one because Jaqueline Crooks can clearly write, and the way that she got across the atmosphere within this book was exceptional. This is set in the 60s in London, following sort of a British Jamaican girl and her experience in the sort of reggae scene, I suppose. And I thought the way that Crooks put music into this novel was masterful, absolutely masterful. Really, really, really like that. Part one, I adored the relationship that she builds with one of the other characters. I thought was exceptional. I really, really enjoyed getting to know our main character through that relationship. However, I feel like Crooks then tried to just pack too much into this novel. It's got themes of domestic violence, generational trauma, grief, loss, and then it also goes into police brutality, and I just feel like if Crooks had picked one of these areas to really hone in on and focused on it, this would have been a 5-star read for me. But because she tried to pack so many things in, it overwhelmed the book. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed. The middle part in particular, I just found a bit all over the shop. The first part and the last part, I was definitely more engaged with. But very excited to see what Crooks comes out with next, because this was her debut novel. And yeah, just a little bit disappointed. But I would say the audiobook was beautifully narrated. So if you're looking to pick this up, then the audio is fabulous. Then we've got another Women's Prize longlisted book. We have Children of Paradise. I have already done a full review for this by Camilla Grudova. This is just a bit of a weird one about a girl who takes a job in a cinema, and everyone who works there is kind of odd, and it's her trying to fit in with these oddballs. Lots of bodily fluids within it. But as I said, I've done a full review, so I'll link that below. I won't I won't linger on it, but I gave it 3.5 stars. The ending was a bit woo, and I'm still not sure if I like that or not, but it did make me sit up and take notes, so it got an extra 0.5 star for that. So then we have a poetry collection. So this is the 3rd month running that I've had poetry in my wrap up. So what has happened to me? And the poetry collection I read was The Lost Words by Robert MacFarlane. I read his other one, The Lost Spells, in January and adored it. This one I didn't like as much, but I still very, very much liked it. I had it out from the library and it's had to go back, so I think I've got some photos. But the illustrations are so beautiful, and I did really enjoy the sort of nature themes of the poetry, but it didn't have as much of a spark for me as The Lost Spells. So yeah. Next up we have Wake The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts by Rebecca Hall and illustrated by Hugo Martinez. This is a graphic novel, and I assumed, rightly or wrongly, from the title, the subtitle, that this was going to be very focused around slave revolts, women-led slave revolts. However, that's not really what this was, which is why it only got 3.5 stars for me. It was really about Rebecca's whole journey of researching women-led slave revolts and the lack of any sort of documentation around that, which is fine if that's what this was marketed as. But I felt like I thought I was going to get more revolts and more sort of insight into women in slavery era US, and it wasn't really about that. It was more about Rebecca Hall and her experience. So I was a bit disappointed, but there were some really, really interesting things in here, particularly around some of the statistics around women and men on the slave ships that went from Africa to the US that were really, really interesting. But yeah, just didn't do what it said on the tin, really, for me. So didn't meet my expectations, unfortunately. Next, I read The Pachinko Palour by Elisa, Shua, Dusapin. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, and I've forgotten to write the translated down, so I'll put that up here. So I picked this up because it was on the International Booker predictions list that Ben Reed's Books put together, and I thought it sounded really interesting. So I gave it a go. The audio was really short, like 3.5 hours, 4 hours, something like that. And I adored the book Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. It's one of my favourite books of all time. So I thought, oh, let's see what this is about. And I liked it enough. It just didn't set my world on fire. It follows a woman who lives in Switzerland, but she's gone over to visit her grandparents in Japan, and she's taken on a job there as a sort of tutor for a young Japanese girl. And it's just about her sort of exploring her roots a little bit, and yeah, it's a little plotless, but I did find a lot of the descriptions of Japan, some of the details around pachinko parlors and Koreans, really, really interesting. You can see the sort of like the generational trauma aspect within there as well, which I thought was well done, but it was just a bit just a bit directionless for me. So it was fine, but not. I'll probably have forgotten it before the summer. So yeah. Next up, we have another one that's had to go back to the library, but I did take some photos of the artwork because it is the graphic novel Are You Listening by Tillie Walden. Again, if you've been following my channel for a hot minute, you'll know that I really, really enjoy Tillie Walden's graphic novels, and I'm trying to slowly work my way through everything she's written. And I gave this one 4 stars, so we're up into 4-star territory. And this looks at a girl who's sort of running away from home. She's experienced some sort of trauma that she's running from. She meets up with a woman that she vaguely knows from home, and they end up going on a road trip together. And we sort of see them sort of exploring their own trauma through their friendship, I suppose, as this book goes on. And I liked it for the most part, but it it turns very, very magical realism about 2/3 of the way through, and it was just a bit off the wall for my tastes. I did really enjoy it until that point, and I enjoyed it when that part had more or less finished. But yeah, I could have not had that section in there, and it would have been better. But yeah, enjoyed it, 4 stars. Next up, we have a middle grade that I read for middle grade March, and that was The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. This is the second in the series. The first one was The Wild Robot, and I very much enjoyed it. Again, it's very, very cozy. We're following a robot, Roz, who in the first book, effectively, the ship that is transporting her crashes, and she is the only survivor, and then she sort of learns how to exist on an uninhabited island with loads of animals. it would be a bit of a spoiler on the first book for me to go into what the second book is about, but it had very, very similar vibes, very heartwarming, a nice look at what makes a person, free will, those sorts of things. And I think Peter Brown does tie in some of these more serious themes into the novel quite seamlessly. So slavery, for example, I think is well illustrated in this novel, and the wrongness of slavery. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And there is one more coming in the series, I think, at some point later this year. So I will look forward to that when it comes out. Next up was another buddy read, and that was Mort by Terry Pratchett that I read with the lovely Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. And this was the first Terry Pratchett for both of us. So that was quite a nice experience that we're both going into this as fully grown adults with no nostalgia to speak of. And so it was really good to have some conversation around that. I think we both rated it 4 stars. And this was just a lot of fun. This follows Mort as he becomes an apprentice to death. So it's very, very comical, really, really funny in places. And Mort as a character was fantastic, but my favourite character by far was Death. Death was hilarious. So yeah, I mean, you think you have a rough job, imagine being Death, basically, is what Terry Pratchett is going for here. And I just thought it was really good. There was a bit of a romance subplot in it that I could have taken or left, really, but I am really, really intrigued to see what happens next in the death sequence, and I think this was definitely a good place to start. So thank you very much to Jack at Spread Book Joy, because she gifted this to me and told me that this was a great place to start, and I very much enjoyed my reading experience. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what more Terry Pratchett has to offer. But I do think that had I read this as a teenager or a young adult, I would have a lot more nostalgia for it now. I think because I'm coming into it as an adult, and also because I've read quite a lot of epic fantasy, that this wasn't quite on a par with some of the other things I've read, but it was hilarious and it was delightfully fun, and I loved it. Next, we have Call Me Indian by Fred Sasakamoose. This was also 4 stars. This is a non-fiction memoir about Fred Sasakamoose's life from being raised on an Indian reservation in Canada to going to residential school to becoming the first Indian NFL player. And he talks a lot about the term Indian within this and refers to himself a lot as Indian. Obviously, I think it's more politically correct for people to say Indigenous, but yeah. And I thought this was fantastic. I thought it was a really good look at Fred's life. It was a little hockey heavy for me. I don't know anything about hockey. It's not really my jam. I'm not super interested. But the parts that I was interested in were Sasakamoose's life growing up. I thought that was really interesting. His relationship and dynamic with his parents. And what I really commend him for is he didn't hold his punches when it looked at self-examination, particularly around his relationship with his wife and his children, and a lot of things that he did wrong, and he is owning up to them within this memoir and saying, look, I did that wrong, I wasn't there, I wasn't present, and I should have been. And it was just refreshing to read that perspective of someone who has done things that they are not proud of and is apologizing for them, and trying to improve themselves continually, even as they go into their 70s, 80s. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I absolutely think it's worth a read if you're interested in any way in sort of the Indigenous life in Canada and a man's sort of struggle with child trauma and how that has impacted his life going forwards. I thought it was really, really well done. Next up, we have A Rovers Story by Jasmine Warger, and I actually listened to the audiobook of this, which was very, very good, but the lovely Middle Grade March team sent this to me. I won it in their giveaway for Middle Grade March, so thank you very much to them. And it was just a really lovely story. You get two perspectives in this. You get the perspective of Rez, the Mars rover, and you also get the perspective of the daughter of the scientist who is working to get Res Mars ready. And I quite liked that sort of interaction between the two, even though they can't speak to each other, the way that they have built this almost innate friendship. I thought it was really well done. You definitely feel for old Res. He goes through quite a lot, particularly when he's on Mars. And it gave me sort of Wally feels in some ways. And I just thought it was really, really lovely. I really enjoyed it. I thought the comedic elements of it were brilliant. I thought Rez's personality came across in spades, and yeah, I would really recommend this as a middle grade. I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you to the middle grade March ladies for putting this one on as the group read. Next up, we have the Women's Prize longlisted book that I have enjoyed the most that I have finished to date, and that is Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. Again, I've done a whole review for this, but basically we're following a woman in a rural village in India who is rumoured to have killed her husband, and then some of the other wives want to know how she did it and if she can help them to do the same. It was darkly funny, but covers some really, really important topics around domestic violence, the caste system, misogyny, all sorts of things. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend, and again, I'll leave my full review linked below. Then second for the month, we have Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez, and this was another BookTube Prize one. I did wax lyrical about this in my BookTube Prize rankings, so please head over there to see the full review. But this one is about a black nurse in the 60s, 70s in the US, and she's working at a family planning clinic, and it is about the liberties basically that the medical industry took, particularly around black and poor communities, and it was heartbreaking, but it also showed the strength, the resilience of this community. And yeah, I adored it. I can't recommend it highly enough. 4.5 stars. Like I say, I wax lyrical about it in that review, so you can go there if you haven't already. Obviously, I'm sure you do watch every video I put out. And then finally, my favourite book of the month was Skandar and the Unicorn Thief by A.F. Steadman. So this is a middle grade novel that I have been reading with my son Sam. We have already pre-ordered the second in the series, which should be with us in any time over the next week or so, I think. I have actually done a whole review for this, but it's not out yet. So I will touch on it lightly, but there's a full review coming because we just adored this. We follow Skandar, a young boy who's being raised in a single parent family, him and his sister, and there is an island where certain special kids are chosen to become unicorn riders and participate in what's called the Chaos Cup, which is sort of like a race with elemental magic, and it's, yeah, but these are not normal unicorns. They're all bloodthirsty and can kill you. And yeah, I'll go into a lot more details in my review, which is coming out next week. But this was just so much fun, and I highly, highly recommend it. Me and Sam adored it, and we cannot wait to go back to some more Skandarness very, very soon. That's it. So I think I have actually done all right. The timer says 25 minutes. So yeah, we're going to take that. But yeah, I would love to know what your favourite books of March were. I feel like we're just so far into April already. Well, we are quite far into April already. It's taken me a hot minute to get this together. But yeah, let me know what your favourite books were. I will leave my BookTube Prize rankings video here because that obviously covers quite a few of the books, but my solo reviews will also be linked in the description box below if you care to watch them. And I will catch you very soon with another one. Bye guys.